All right. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Whenever you're tuning in, I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I appreciate you listening. This is going to be podcast number 6. So if this is your first time listening, I hope you enjoy it. And if you've listened before, thanks for coming back, and I really appreciate the support. This is probably going to be my favorite podcast thus far for a multitude of reasons, with the primary one being I got to do it face-to-face in person. I feel like the conversation flow is always much better when you can catch someone in person, but that's not always the case. Got to do it this time, and I really enjoyed it. This episode is going to be officially sponsored by a pretty badass dude, my dad, Brian. Dad introduced me to Larry last year when we got to take his advanced handgun course, showed me who Larry was, and got the opportunity to do that, and I couldn't have done that without my dad. So Dad, thank you for showing me, giving me this opportunity, and always being there for me. I really appreciate it. I love you. And like I said, couldn't have done it without you. And of course, I have to give a shout out to my mom, Tony, who is always there for me, supporting me no matter what I do. Mom keeps telling everyone on Facebook that I'm going to be the next Joe Rogan. So got big shoes to fill, according to my mom. But thank you for all the support. I couldn't be here without either of you guys, and I love you, and I really appreciate it. All right, man, we're on, Larry. Thank you for taking the time to do this, man. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I want to say thanks for the class, too. This is my second year. My dad introduced me to you, and it's been a lot of fun.
Good.
You didn't lie about putting me out of my comfort zone, I'm going to be honest, because I don't shoot a whole lot, but it's been good. I learned a lot, man. I really appreciate it. So.
Yep. I saw you were shooting a SIG P320.
Yep.
Yeah, they really starting to see a lot of them in classes.
Yep.
Yeah, big time.
Dad was telling me it might be hard to, because it's pretty new. He was telling me it might be hard to find because the Army just took over that contract, like you said. But a lot of the places around here still have quite a bit of stuff. So
yeah, they've become the number 2 most popular gun I've seen in my classes after Glocks.
I remember you saying it's usually a 50-50 split now. So
yeah, a lot. Well, in this class there was actually more P320s.
Yeah. So hey, dude, this is your first class back since COVID, right? No.
No, actually, I've had a couple since COVID hit. I had 3 classes canceled because of COVID, and then I ended up doing a class down in Houston.
Oh yeah, that's right.
But I've had a couple now back since COVID. I've got to cancel one next week because it's up in Connecticut, and you have to self-quarantine if you go up there from North Carolina where I live, which I'm not going to do. So I had to cancel that class.
Yeah, you're not from North Carolina, are you?
I'm originally from Ohio. I ended up down in North Carolina because I was down there in the Army.
Yep.
And then I ended up marrying a North Carolina gal, so we ended up staying there. So I've been in North Carolina, actually, as long as I was ever in Ohio.
So are you Southern or Northern?
Northern. North Carolina and Northern.
Okay.
Yeah. Real close to the South Carolina border, though.
Yeah. Well, dude, most people who follow you know a lot about you, so I kind of wanted to pitch some things to people who may have no idea who you are, because people who are maybe newer to the gun community and whatnot. So kind of give us a short glimpse of your story and what you're about and where you came from. So
well, my dad was a World War II vet, so it kind of stuck in my head to go in the military. He always talked highly about the Rangers, so that's what I was going to do. I was going to go in the military as a Ranger, and he gave me a .22 bolt-action rifle when I was a little kid, and that started me on the path to being a gun guy because I just loved it. I mean, I loved the .22 bolt gun and whatnot, and it just went from there. So I thought, well, I'll go in the Army and specialize in weapons. Well, as it turns out, I started doing some research on the Rangers, and I found out there's this thing called Special Forces, Green Berets, and you could go in as a weapons specialist. So that kind of did the deal right there. So, and it just so happened I was able to go in. This was early 80s after Ronald Reagan became president, so they were expanding all the military, and you could actually go in and go straight to Special Forces. That didn't last long. It wasn't really a very successful program, but that didn't last long. But I was one of the guys that did it and ended up going right in from high school, ended up going into the Green Berets, made, I was in for 4 years. I was a little bit disappointed on how it went out when everything went down. So I got out for a couple of years, went to college, and then I decided to go back in to try for Delta Force. Made it on my second try, and then I spent the rest of my career in Delta. And then retired December of 03. Got out, went to work for HK for a period of time, and then ended up starting doing my own business, and I've kind of been self-employed ever since. It was a pretty scary leap initially, but I had my military retirement, so I kind of had a guaranteed mortgage, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to try this self-employed thing, and here I am. It's worked out. No regrets.
I was going to ask you about that. I didn't know if the business kind of fell into you, or if that was your plan all along since it came so natural. Or
yeah, no, it was not my plan all along. I just saw kind of things how they were going, and I just decided to give it a shot. I'm thinking about trying being self-employed, and boy, that was a fateful decision for the best, because you'll never work. The old analogy is you'll never work harder than you do for yourself, and that's very true. And then once you become self-employed and you're successful, it's almost like hard to imagine anything else. I mean, I remember talking to friends of mine who were self-employed, and they go, yeah, you just can't even imagine not being self-employed. And that's kind of where I'm at now. I can't even imagine like giving this up and going to a regular 9-to-5 job or whatever. It was kind of an interesting thing, but I look back, and it was a big leap of faith, but it's certainly one I'm glad I took.
Yeah, I know a lot of people that work for themselves, and they say, you think you're going to leave so you can work less, but you're going to work.
Actually, you're going to work more.
Longer.
Yeah, you'll work harder for yourself than you will anybody else.
Yeah, you got no support but yourself, at least when you start out. So, kind of bridge into that topic. We watched Larry at the movies. How did that come about? Is that like a fun thing you did, or is that part of consulting?
It started. I can't remember who came up with the idea, but we did Collateral first. And we actually went out and kind of recreated the scene and everything. And it was a pretty simple thing to do, but there was a lot of logistics to it. And it was real successful. Everybody loved it. And then quite a while later, people were like, hey, you need to do heat. You need to do the heat scene outside the bank robbery and all that jazz. And we were like, cool, but how do we set this up? I mean, logistically, this is going to be bad, very difficult. So then we thought, somebody goes, hey, why don't you just do a deal where you sit down with a mic and have a laptop in front of you and go through the movie and pick out things to talk about. And Larry at the movies. And I thought, not a bad idea. So we've been doing it now, and it's been very popular. People really like it.
Do you enjoy it?
Yeah, I do. I'll be honest with you. It's hard to find movies. There's just not that many movies out there that are really good in regards to tactics or weapons handling. It's kind of hard to find them. I had somebody the other day say, hey, you ought to pick a really bad one or review a really bad one. I say, that's a good idea. So I'm going to maybe start getting out of the box a little bit and maybe starting to look at movies that aren't necessarily primarily gun movies where guns are in it, but not necessarily
not full-blown action.
Yeah, like No Country for Old Men, which I really like. And I was actually watching some of it last night, and I'm going to start taking some notes, and hopefully we can do that movie. Granted, it's got guns in it, but it's not primarily a gun movie.
Right.
Movies like that, and then pick something that's actually pretty bad, and then try to talk about why it's so bad. But it's super popular.
Yeah, I was watching a handful of them, and I noticed one, the timestamp on your channel. It was like a year ago, and I'm paraphrasing here, but I want to say you had like maybe 400,000 views on it or something. And then there was one you did a month ago, and it's already at like 300. It's right behind it.
Bingo. The Sicario one, but real big.
Yeah, Dad was talking about that one.
That was a real big one.
Yeah.
People like that one a lot. I'm sure we'll end up doing Sicario too.
Yeah.
Everybody always wanted the John Wick movies. I mean, the John Wick movies it's like, my director said, he summed it up best. They're really kung fu movies with guns. I mean, they're cool, but they're not really. They're just kung fu movies. They're martial art movies with guns. They're not really practical. So it's hard for somebody like me with my background in special ops to sit down and take the John Wick movies very seriously and to try to give them a real honest review when it's clearly obvious. I mean, nothing against them. I mean, they're made for entertainment.
Sure.
It's basically a martial arts movie with guns.
And you said, we talked about it yesterday a little bit, but you said your buddies, or you have buddies who do like Hollywood consulting for those guys. Have you done any of that, or is that just your friends?
No, just buddies of mine out there.
How does that work?
Well, one guy gets connected with another guy that gets connected with another guy, and then they get worked in on it. My buddy Tyler Gray does it, and he's actually on that SEAL Team TV show.
Okay.
He's on the show as a regular. I mean, he's kind of a secondary player, but he's on there as a regular.
Yeah. He's
been doing it for a while. He likes it. You pretty much have to live out there in Cali, which I would have no interest in doing.
Sure.
And then the other thing is, I mean, I make good money training people in classes, so in order for me to do the movie stuff, I would have to make really comparable money, and they aren't going to pay that. When they got guys, former Marines or Navy SEALs,
right,
or former cops that will do it for a fraction of what I would charge. And to be honest with you, the average person watching the movie wouldn't know any difference between somebody that I trained or somebody that an LAPD retired cops trained. So it's just not. And I don't live in Cali. So you add that up, and no, I've never done for the movies. At one time I was thinking about pursuing it, but once I dug into it, I waved it off.
Yeah, so you're just doing your Larry at the movies.
Dude, I got plenty.
Sure.
I've got plenty of things going on without pursuing that.
What were you doing during the pandemic? I know you said you were locked in at home going crazy, so did you do anything different, or what'd you do? Because you're normally a physical guy doing training classes and being out and about,
Yeah.
so how did that work?
Well, I was forced to kind of slow down a bit. It just, I'm usually a busy guy, and I'm planning doing other stuff and whatnot. I didn't do a lot other than relax, and to be honest with you, trying to relax for a long period of time is not very relaxing.
Sure.
I mean, you kind of get cabin fever. I had to cancel 3 training classes. We did a little bit of filmed a little bit for my YouTube channel. Honestly, didn't do much other than relaxing, which, like I said, that gets a little old.
And so what do you got planned for the next 6 to 12 months? Picking classes back up again,
doing my classes as best I can. Hopefully they'll fill in different places, like the classes up here filled great. With COVID and whatnot, it's hard to really get a handle on where you're going to be able to go do classes and where you're not, where they're going to have restrictions and where they're not. Just trying to pick up my training schedule as best I can and kind of piece it back together since COVID kind of wrecked it.
Yeah. You said something in class the other day, and I want you to say it again you said there's more handguns currently now than there was at the height of World War II. Is that correct?
No,
in the U.S.?
Ammo consumption.
Okay.
Yeah. I talked to some friends of mine, and they told me that ammo consumption in the United States now is in excess to at the peak of World War II. There's more ammo being consumed in the civilian and law enforcement and military, for that matter, but mainly civilian and law enforcement market than at the peak of World War II.
And why is that?
You have more people shooting than ever before, and then they're shooting more. When I was a kid, people would go to the range. A lot of shooting was 50 rounds or whatever. I mean, the concept of people going out and taking training classes or shooting competitions and shooting 200, 300, or 400 rounds in a day, it just didn't happen. I mean, it just didn't happen.
So now it's a lot more common.
Oh, yeah, it's just a lot more common. Back then, people would go out. If they shot a box or 2 of ammo, that was a lot of shooting. Or they'd go out and they'd sight in a hunting rifle. Things are totally different now. You got more people shooting more ammo now than ever before.
Sure. I really like the thing you said yesterday. Me and Dad were talking about it I don't know, there's a lot of people out there who, anti-gun or not big fans of concealed carry. They think that most people just want to shoot someone's head off when they get the shot. But a gentleman in class said, what would you do if you in a mall and there's an active shooter? And the first thing you said was, if you don't have skin in the game or a dog in the fight, get out.
Yep, bail.
I'm not going to say that surprised me, but it kind of did because, we're in such a gun-heavy class. But I think that's important for people to know that a lot of times you're just wanting to protect yourself.
Absolutely. If you and your family or loved ones are not in harm's way, and you have the option to egress or the option to escape, you would be a fool not to. I mean, you got to get out of there. Now, like I said yesterday, school situation, that's a little bit different story.
Sure.
And in my opinion, you got to take the fight to the bad guy in a school situation.
Yeah, save the young ones.
And to be honest with you, we've seen it over and over and over again. Generally, the people that are going into schools are not well trained. I mean, so in most all cases, you could, with if you assert yourself, you can overpower them and you can dominate the situation. So in a school, I'd look at that totally different. But if you're in a shopping mall or somewhere, or a gas station, if you have the ability to get out of there and get out of harm's way, absolutely.
Yeah, and Dad and I were also talking earlier about your not your famous quote, but you said every bullet has a lawyer attached to
Yeah.
it. So you're high risk of shooting unless you have to.
I think my buddy Hackathorn said that first that I heard him say it. It's the truth. Every bullet's got a lawyer attached to it. So you own that. When you pull the trigger, you own it. And you have to make sure that you're pulling the trigger for the right reason.
Yeah, and he was saying how you were referencing, because I'd seen the pictures on the internet, but I didn't know much about the story about the couple in St. Louis that were just sweeping people, and you got to keep low ready.
Yeah, so. I mean, everybody understands why they did what they did. The problem with what they did is they're brandishing. I mean, they were pointing a gun, which in most places in this country, I mean, I'm not an attorney, but in most places in this country, that's a felony. You just can't point a gun at people. Granted, they're rioters or whatnot, and they're threatening that they weren't actually on your property. You just can't. Now, they could have been out low ready. They could have told them to back away. They could have done a number of things without brandishing, without sweeping them with their muzzle. That is where they got in trouble. Now, that being said, I'm confident they'll get good legal representation and they'll be able to get their guns back, and probably the whole thing will go away. But they're going to be in a quagmire until that happens. It's probably going to cost them a serious amount of money. It's just going to be a mess until it all gets resolved.
You think most people pointing a weapon when they shouldn't be are either intimidated, or do you think that they're just uneducated, or both?
I would say uneducated. And if you understand, if you can sit down and get educated, and hopefully if you're carrying concealed, you've had training or you've invested enough time to look at the situation and go, you know what? If I pull this gun out, this is a big deal. Just bringing it out of the holster is a big deal. Obviously, you're carrying it for a reason, but you need to understand the responsibilities go with that. And if you arbitrarily point the gun at people, I mean, you got to make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. To intimidate or scare them or get them to back away, you don't need to be doing that. I mean, you can get in serious trouble over that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it makes sense. It's kind of I'd be scared to death when I had to point a gun at somebody. So
yeah, you got it. I mean, it's there for a reason, but you got to, those people were a perfect example. They if they would have brought their pistols out or their firearms out and had them at the low ready and not point them at anybody, they probably would have a completely different result. But they swept the crowd. They were pointing at people, and I understand why.
Sure.
But it doesn't mean that was the right thing to do.
Yeah. Well, you're super consistent, obviously, with your experience and things you tell us. But I vividly remember both classes I've taken a year apart. You said, especially with people filming stuff nowadays, if you're in a Walmart parking lot, even if you were trying to pursue someone that's needed, keep low ready until you have to, because if someone catches you, it looks a lot better in defense instead of being.
Fortunately, I'm affiliated with CCW Safe. I'm a brand ambassador with those guys. They are a membership plan for people who carry concealed. It's not an insurance-based thing. It's a membership thing. It's a different animal. It's set up differently. So therefore, they're not running into problems in New York and these other places where they're being shut down because it's murder insurance. CCW Safe is not that way. They're a membership plan that protects their members.
Okay. If you get involved in a
self-defense shooting, right? And they're the only major player that has taken a murder case all the way to its resolution. They had a guy, one of the members, get in a self-defense shooting, and it didn't cost him a dime, and they took it all the way up through to where the guy was acquitted. They're the only people in the game that have done that so far. They've got some fantastic legal counsel, including Don West. Don West was lead counsel on the Zimmerman trial.
Oh, wow.
So the guy is just razor sharp, and I've had some long talks with him about what makes sense and what doesn't, and just information for me I can use in my training classes. So when I regurgitate a lot of that stuff, it's stuff that I've gotten from Don in Q&As that I've had with him. And that was certainly, his thing was, you got to look what is in the eyes of the reasonable man, in the eyes of a person who's on the jury, who's not a gun guy, probably doesn't carry concealed. He, works at, the local hardware store, or he's a construction guy, the eyes of the reasonable man, what was a reasonable thing to do? You need to be looking at it from that perspective. When you're standing in front of a jury and you got to defend why you're doing something a certain way.
Yeah. I've heard some horror stories, too, about guys in the military even being overseas and having to defend themselves for shooting. Did you see any of that in your own time?
No,
with friends of friends? Or?
Not when I was there. Fortunately, I didn't have any of that. I can believe it.
So you think it's a generational change? I think,
yeah, things have went too far in that direction. There's reasons why that's happened. I don't necessarily agree with it, but there are reasons why that kind of stuff has happened. Yeah, and in the U.S., of course, you got to be very much aware of it.
Yeah,
it's that carrying a firearm and bringing it out of the holster comes with a tremendous amount of responsibility. You basically have to do everything that a reasonable man would do. You have to do everything that makes sense in those circumstances to prevent having to take somebody's life.
Yeah. Hey, man, this is way off topic, and you may have no idea, but it just made me think about it, talking about that. So there's a lot of information out there, no matter what you're doing, reading, anything. So when American Sniper came out, watched the movie, read the book, followed into that, years down the road, I see these, it's like not a 30 for 30, like a Dateline interview or something. I don't even know much about this guy, but I think it's Jesse Ventura.
Mm-hmm.
Comes out and speaks out and says that apparently Chris Kyle stole his story and he fabricated and punched him in a bar. Do you know anything about any of that down to the truth? Because he came out and just blasted him.
I don't know of any personal knowledge of any of it.
Yeah.
I don't have any direct personal knowledge.
Sure.
What I have heard is some of the stuff that Chris Kyle put in the book was sensationalized. That some of the things that he put in the book as being fact were not 100% on how things happened. I heard the Jesse Ventura thing was definitely one of them.
So Jesse Ventura was right?
Yeah. I mean, I want to say Jesse Ventura sued
his foundation.
Or the Chris Kyle estate, and he won.
Yeah.
I think that's what happened. So from what I understand, the Jesse Ventura thing is not true. Also, the story where he, I believe, there was an attempted robbery at a gas station in Texas or something.
Okay.
I haven't read the book. And he shot like 3 or 4 dudes, and when the cops showed up, he basically gave him a get out of jail free card, and they let him go. From what I understand, that was fabricated. That never happened.
Okay.
So I think there was some stuff in the book that was sensationalized. And the Jesse Ventura thing is one of them.
Yeah.
That's what I've been told. I have no direct personal knowledge of it.
Sure. Yeah, I honestly, that wasn't even something I planned on talking about, but it made me think about them being overseas and then the issues and whatnot, but I was just curious.
I would hope that's not the case, because the problem with that is when you sensationalize something, I mean, it just throws a big black cloud, because the theory is, okay, well, if he's lying about this, what else is he lying about?
Sure.
So I would hope that wouldn't be the case, but I've heard that from a number of people.
I know in that little YouTube video clip I watched that interview, Jesse Ventura was also a little mad about, he said back in, an old school thing, back in his day, people didn't know you were a SEAL and people didn't know much about it, and now a lot of the newer guys are writing books and making profits off of it. And then he went into how profiting off of things that are stretching the truth as well. So
Yep.
That was just kind of a hard one, because when that stuff came out, you couldn't say one bad thing about Chris Kyle, and then that YouTube interview came out, and he was just trashing him, said that he was fabricated and slandered his name and all kinds of stuff. So
yeah, I'd heard that story back in the day from a buddy of mine who was a SEAL, and it was given to me as if it happened, and then fast forward and more information comes out, and turns out it's not true. It was fabricated.
Interesting.
So,
well, regardless, I enjoyed his book and his story, and then the movie, but. The
movie was hugely successful.
Yeah, it was. I enjoyed the book too, but I got a couple of buddies who are followers, and I had asked them if they had pitched anything to you to ask, if you don't mind. But these are some sporadic questions, but from my buddy Dan Jones, who's a former law enforcement, and he's an attorney, or he's a lawyer now, but he lost a lot of weight too. He was interested. He said, talking about CrossFit, about your video and CrossFit losing weight and get back in shape. You still onto that? How is that going?
Well, we moved recently,
yeah.
So me doing CrossFit is kind of went out the window. If anybody knows anything about moving, it just turns your life upside down. Now, when the dust settles, I hope to get back to it.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. One thing that I did learn, and it's a tough pill to swallow, is you're not 25 anymore, and you got to be able to scale what you're doing to your age, because you can hurt yourself. You can get hurt doing it. So you gotta be smart about doing it. You gotta remember, hey, you're twice that age. You're not. So you see some of the stuff that the younger participants are doing. You got to kind of tone that down. I had to learn that the hard way. I think a lot of people have learned that.
Yeah, that's why CrossFit's good though, is because you can, there's 17-year-olds in there, and then there's people in their 60s, and you're doing the same workout, but you're modifying it and scaling it, and it's not like showing up to a Planet Fitness and you have no idea what to do. You kind of got the coaching.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I just got to get back to it. I mean, since we moved, it's been horrendous.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand. Moving is not fun.
No.
Shooting the Browning bar. Is it bar, B-A-R? He said, is it awesome as it seems?
Well, it's cool to shoot. It's really a World War I gun that was carried over to World War II. When you look at its equivalent in the Bren gun is actually a much better gun. Bren gun has a quick change barrel. It's just a much better weapon for what it is. BAR's cool gun, very historic gun, but it was a gun that was really designed for World War I per se, and it didn't really transfer over to World War II that great. The gun certainly got the job done, but it's a good example of us going to war with the guns we had, not necessarily the guns we needed. The Thompson submachine gun's a good example of that too. We went to war with the Thompson submachine gun, which was the gun we had, not necessarily the gun we needed.
Yeah. And this last question, you've probably been asked thousands of times before now, and you could go down a rabbit hole forever, but he's former law enforcement, so he asked, do you have any advice for law enforcement followers given the current environment in our country? So you could take as long or as little you have for that.
I would just say, just two things. Keep in mind that no matter what you're doing, somebody's filming you.
Sure.
So you need to be,
that's brand new.
When you got that uniform on, somebody's filming you no matter what you're doing. So you just got to keep that in mind and fully expect it to come back to haunt you. I would tell you that's the number one thing. And then, unfortunately, you just got to, if you see something wrong or you see a cop that is a bad cop, you got to call them out. You have to. Because if not, what will happen is like what happened in that George Floyd situation. What that cop did on George, putting his knee on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes, that was terrible.
Sure.
There's no one that thought that was. So my guess is that guy probably identified himself as being less than a good cop, and he really, you got to police your own. You got to police your own. So if you see somebody that doesn't need to be on the job, you have to call them out, and you have to take action, because what can happen is exactly what happened in that case with George Floyd. That was way out of line.
Yeah.
That was way out of line.
Yeah, without going too far off the deep end on that, I thought it was real disappointing that the guys with him didn't say anything.
Absolutely.
At all. Not even a, hey, man.
Take your knee off him. That's unnecessary. That was terrible.
Yeah.
It was absolutely terrible. Now, unfortunately, what happened after the fact with the protests and things got out of hand, what happened to George Floyd and the message there and the lessons that were supposed to be learned completely went out the window.
Yep.
Because nobody can sit there and justify the stuff they did after the fact. It wasn't about George Floyd. It was about anarchy.
Yeah. And for whatever reason, I don't add fuel to the fire. I don't think that, people being unemployed and locked up for 2 months, caged up, being told what to do the whole time helped either. It may have not.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
For sure.
A lot of the hot talk is that the police, well, one, are underpaid, and two, they get little to no training.
Yep. Agreed on both counts.
I don't know where people go from that, but, not even with a weapon, but just de-escalating a situation and whatnot. Yep. So.
Oh, yeah. You're 100% right. You got a guy out there that really has not been trained to the standard he should. He's not being paid that great. He's got a really thankless job, and now he's got every person under the sun trying to film him to catch him, at his worst possible moment. It's a terrible job. It's a thankless job. And here's the problem. I was talking to some buddies of mine. They brought up a good point. The people who are going to suffer most out of this are the people that live in low-income neighborhoods, the people that actually need police protection and help the most. They're the ones that are going to suffer the most over this stuff.
Yeah. I think a lot of people talk about, going way deep into race and whatnot, but someone had said something I think I agreed with, was that a lot of crime is, like you said, is poverty, because people are, for whatever reason, going crazy and have to do outlandish things to survive or put food on the table.
And it's defund the police, and you make things so hard for the police to do their job. I mean, it's human, it's human nature. I mean, it's natural. They're gonna shy away from putting themselves in confrontations that could come back to haunt them, which means then if the people that need their protection the most are not going to get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah. We were going to ask too a little bit about your 1911 that you're working on, kind of the process of how that works and how long it was and kind of where you're at with it.
The Springfield one?
Yes.
Yeah, we started that, it was less than a year ago. I was down visiting Lipsy's, and I was talking to my buddy Jason Klausner. It was when we did the official launch on the Vickers Tactical Glock G43. And Mr. Lipsy's came over and, had a good conversation with us and had a great visit. And then he said, I'd love to do a 1911 with you. We'd love to find out a way to do a reasonably priced 1911. Well, Jason Klausner and I had talked about it before, and we really didn't see a path forward because I was affiliated with Wilson Combat, brand ambassador for Wilson Combat. And Wilson Combat 1911s are all premium 1911s. They're not inexpensive guns. So it's like, I can't see a path forward here. And we got to talk, and he said, what if we hooked up with somebody like a Colt or a Springfield, but we used some Wilson parts, so everybody was kind of happy in the mix. And I said, well, I need to call Wilson's and get them to bless off on it. And they ultimately can say yay or nay, and whatever they say, that's what we're going to go with, because I was hooked up with them, affiliated with them first, whatnot. So I called my buddy Guy Jubert at Wilson and said, hey, this is what we're thinking about doing. It's not going to directly compete with you guys. It's going to be at a much lower price point, but we want to try to use as many Wilson parts as possible that it's feasible in the price point. And he said, absolutely no problem. We're all for it. So they gave it their blessing, and then we were off to the races. Approached Colt first, and I got a good friend that works at Colt. It just wasn't coming together with Colt. Colt, they kind of can make a certain number of 1911s a day. They were already maxed out. They had a lot of back orders. It just wasn't coming together. It was kind of becoming too tough of a nut to crack with Colt. And we already started thinking about going to Springfield. And even my buddy at Colt said, you know what, I hate to turn down business, but you might be better off calling Springfield. So we called Springfield, and they were all for it. And I've had a long relationship with them. I got friends that work there. I'm buddies with Rob Latham. I do joint classes with Rob. So that was a no-brainer. Called Springfield, and they were all for it. And so then we just had to come up with the particulars. And one thing that we were real sticklers on, and Lipsy's really hammered this home, is the price point. This gun cannot be too expensive, because if we do, it's all going to be a waste of time. So that's where that $14.95 price point came in, and it's been universally praised. People have been blown away by the 1911 you can get for that price point. So that was a home run. We stuck hard to the price point, and it's been a home run. The guns sell out like immediately. Lipsy's gets like 100 a month. They've only been released now for a few months. Lipsy's gets like 100 a month. As soon as they show up, they're gone. Generally, there's already pre-orders for them, and literally the day they come in, they're gone. And I anticipate that, especially with the way things are in the gun industry now, I anticipate that to continue into the foreseeable future. They've been a big success. It's a great gun for the money. Hopefully, if it continues and everything is looking good, we'll be able to add different models to it, different 9mm models, maybe a Commander model. So that's what we're hoping. We just started with a classic 5-inch 45 ACP, barrel bushing, all steel gun, no light rail, just kind of the classic 1911. That's where we started. Our intent is to do more models, but that's why we started there.
So pretty much everybody that knows about you or gets to you, finds you, takes your classes, is obviously pretty advanced. For some people that might listen or tune in, what would you give some basic 2-3 pointers from somebody who's just starting out, somebody who's like, hey, I want a handgun, I want to protect myself, maybe conceal carry. What are you recommending them to buy and first things to do? Just, maybe take this back to like the dumb level for people who are kind of new, just quick pointers.
First off, right off the bat, they got to find out what real firearm safety is. They need to understand, they don't want to be scared of the gun. They want to respect it. And they need to understand what firearm safety is. I just did a video recently on what I call the LAV, Real World Firearm Safety Rules. And it's basically the classic 4 safety rules that the NRA uses, or Jeff Cooper came up with or whatnot. And I just put my real world twist on it. Watch that video or watch a different video on firearm safety. Get a thorough understanding what firearm safety is all about, and then start looking at different guns. I can tell you the baseline gun that I tell people to look at is a Glock 19. Now, we're in the COVID hysteria right now. Any double-stack 9mm, including a Glock 19, is going to be hard to find. They sell out almost immediately. But what I tell people is, under normal circumstances, is you'll never regret buying a Glock 19. You could own 10 guns or 1,000 guns, and you'll never regret owning a Glock 19. It's a great gun to start with, and then kind of go from there. You may need to go to a rental indoor range, try a few different guns. You may need to go in there and shoot a 22 at first, to kind of get past some of the issues for recoil and muzzle blast and whatnot. And then look to see if you have a local trainer, somebody who's got some experience that you can talk to, people that have taken training with them, maybe former law enforcement, somebody that can give you the basics, can take you to the range, spend a half day with you or a day, and give you the fundamentals on how to present the pistol to the target, sight alignment, trigger control, that kind of a thing. So I would tell you, first off, study what firearm safety is really about in the real world. Number 2, look at getting a pistol along the lines of a Glock 19. Could be a different gun. You could get an M&P along that line, or a SIG P320, but look in that direction. It's kind of hard to beat those guns. And then look at somebody local who can give you some good basic firearms training. That's where I would tell you to start.
That's good stuff. I appreciate you doing that. I think that'll help a lot of people. Like I said, a lot of people that find you are advanced, but there's a lot of people out there who are about to start getting in that and have nowhere to start.
Yeah, absolutely.
Got a couple more personal questions for you, then I'll probably let you go. I know
All
I've
right.
taken your time, if you don't mind, but you live and breathe, you're training your guns and weapons. What do you do on your free time? We're taking no weapons away. What are you doing when you've got some downtime?
Kind of hanging out with the family, watching some old movies or whatnot on my iPad, on Netflix or Amazon Prime. Different movies that I like, different TV series that I like. Big fan of Breaking Bad.
Oh, yeah.
Watched it, yeah. I'm actually going back through it again. I just started it again.
Did you like the movie they put out?
Yeah,
at the end?
I was pleasantly surprised. I was very hesitant that movie El Camino, I just thought, you know what, they should probably just leave it alone. You know what I mean? But
I thought so too.
But honestly, it was better than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it, and it was better than I thought it was. I need to go back and rewatch it. I've only watched it once. And I like to watch new stuff that, like Chernobyl, I thought was phenomenal. Probably the best thing I've ever seen in my life. It was unbelievably good. So I'm always looking for stuff like that. Ozark was a good series, very good.
Parents are big Ozark fans.
What's that?
Parents are big Ozark fans.
Oh, yeah, Ozark's very good. I like it. So just kind of stuff like that, or some old classic movies that I like. I like No Country for Old Men. Just some old stuff like that. That's one thing I like to do to kind of unwind and relax in the evening. Kind of hang out with the family, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
When I'm not fully immersed in the gun industry or
Sure.
the gun community or whatnot.
Did you dip into Better Call Saul off of Breaking Bad?
A little bit. I kind of tapered off on it about season 2. I don't know. It just didn't quite grab me like Breaking Bad did. I probably now should go back and revisit it. But I watched the first season and kind of gave it a mediocre rating, and I started the second season, and I don't know. I probably need to give it a fresh look.
So my brother and I talk a lot about buying a luxury watch. if it's worth it, what it is. And I know you're a Rolex guy. You talk about. I don't know if you have a lot or not, but you're a fan. You say so. Could you sell me on a Rolex and why it's worth the money?
Well, I've got a couple. I used to have more, but I've actually sold a few of them. I've got a couple of them. The first off, they hold their value very well.
That's what Dad says.
Very well. I mean, better than any brand that I'm aware of. So they really hold their value. Two, they're a rugged, reliable watch. They have a reputation for being very rugged and reliable. Three, they have a history to them. They go back to World War II. There's history. If you do some research, there's some World War II history on Rolex. So there's a lot of history to the brand. So when you add up the history, the ruggedness and reliability, and how they retain their value, they're pretty hard to beat.
Yeah,
they're pretty hard to beat. And generally, the money you spend on a good Rolex is money well invested.
And if you're buying used, yes, no, recommend or?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is now the so-called sport watches, your Submariners, your Deep Seas, your GMT Masters, the so-called sport watches, your Daytonas, they're all insane money because Rolex has really controlled the amount of them they build. So unfortunately, this is not a very good time to be buying a Rolex. And the other thing is, I don't know when the time will be good to be buying a Rolex so-called sport watch. They have really now, value-wise, went through the roof.
I know you got a lot of connections and friends internationally all over the world. You said you talk about in class a lot. Have you ever looked into buying some in another country, hitting the exchange rate, or is that pretty non-existent?
Well, you can do a little bit of that. A buddy of mine out in California said he was flying out of Taiwan or something, and he could get a Submariner at a brand new Submariner at a Rolex authorized dealer like in Taiwan for $7,500. And he was like,
and what are they new or
God,
regular?
Now you
US?
can't even here in the States. You can't even touch them for $9,000.
Okay.
I mean, you can't even a brand new one at a dealer. I mean, so he's like, should I have done it? And I went, yeah, dude, you should have. He goes, well, how do I know if it was fake? And I said, well, was it at a Rolex authorized dealer? And he said, yeah. And he goes, well, then it's not fake. And I said, man, that was not smart. You should have bought that watch. Bare minimum, if you didn't want it, you could have came back and sold it and made some money on it.
Right.
Bare minimum. But I told him, I said, yeah, so you can still do a little bit of that. It's not like it was back in the day. Back in the day, I mean, overseas, you could get one and really kill it on the exchange rate or buy them for a fraction of the price you buy them in the States. Those days are kind of over.
Is it kind of like the stock market? It comes and goes, or you're just saying that's pretty much gone forever?
Well, yeah, I think that's gone forever. Whether or not the sport watches will eventually come down, I don't know. I don't know if they're at a new level now and they're really not going to come down. I just don't know. I can tell you one thing. Historically speaking, they're from a watch point of view, they're certainly the best investment.
Yeah. Well, dude, this time is as much of your time as it is mine. Is there anything you'd want to say on here before we close it out? I mean,
yeah. Well, one thing, and I said this in my video on the firearms safety. You know, we have a lot of new shooters and a lot of new first-time gun owners based on COVID and the protests and whatnot. You got tons of people who are buying guns for the first time. Some of them might have been anti-gun. Some of them may be, liberals, whatnot. Now's not the time to be arrogant. Now's not the time to be condescending. Now's the time to embrace them into the firearms community. You want to be a Second Amendment ambassador to all those people. It's critical because, remember, we have to have everybody on board, as many people as we can get on board to assure that the Second Amendment is there for our kids and for future generations. And because very much the Second Amendment is the one that guarantees that the other ones are not going to be violated.
Sure.
Make no mistake. The Second Amendment is there for that purpose. So it's critical. And so when you have these new people, we have more new people now than any time in history buying guns. This
Sure.
COVID thing, in the first 6 months of 2020, there were more new shooters and more new gun buyers than any time in history. You need to welcome them to the family.
Yeah,
you need to be a brand ambassador.
It's a whole different comparison, but that makes me think about when you're working out and you're in shape, and then you got someone New Year's Eve coming in, super chunky, trying to lose weight. Don't make fun of them.
Exactly.
They don't know
That's
what
right.
they're doing. They're just trying to get in there and get better.
Everybody starts somewhere.
Yep.
That's right.
That's good stuff. Any questions? You guys good? Well, Larry, I really, really appreciate it, man.
You're welcome.
I know it's a cliche statement, but truly thank you for your service. I think sometimes, it's kind of hard to notice what you've done for the U.S. unless you talk about it in depth. And thank you for, all the knowledge you've given me in the classes and the time. And it's really been great to chat with you, and I really do appreciate it.
You're welcome. Have a good one, man. Stay safe.
Yeah, man. We'll keep in touch, and I'll get you this as soon as I can cut it. So.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Have a good one.